Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are stepping right into the lion's den. And I don't use that phrase lightly. We are virtually heading into the Knesset plenum in Jerusalem for what is known as a 40 signatures debate. Now, if you're imagining a polite, structured exchange of ideas, you might want to adjust your expectations. This is high drama. This is political combat.
It really is. And for those who might not follow the minutia of Israeli parliamentary procedure, which, let's be honest, is most people, this isn't just a standard Tuesday afternoon chat. A 40 signatures debate is a specific, very sharp tool that the opposition has. It's essentially a mechanism to force a confrontation.
Right, because usually a prime minister can choose when to speak. Yeah, they can pick their moments.
Exactly. Normally, a leader controls the agenda. But here, if the opposition manages to get 40 members of Knesset to sign a petition, that's 1/3 of the House, they can force the prime minister to come to the plenum. He has to sit there. He has to listen to critique after critique, speaker after speaker. And then, crucially, he cannot just leave.
Yeah.
He is obligated to stand up and respond.
It's a grilling by design. I mean, it's meant to be uncomfortable. But what we have in front of us today is the full transcript of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's response to one of these sessions. And let me tell you, reading through this, he didn't just show up to deflect a few questions, dodge a few bullets. He showed up to lay out an entire defense.
That's the perfect way to put it. It's not a defensive speech in terms of posture. It's an offensive defense. It is a comprehensive document. It covers everything from the micro level. We're talking about specific tragic accidents in kindergartens and local crime families in the South, all the way up to existential nuclear threats from Iran and his personal, somewhat colorful relationship with Donald Trump.
It's a masterclass in political rhetoric, regardless of how you feel about the politics themselves. It weaves these disparate threads together into a single narrative. So our mission today is to decode this. We're going to look at how he connects these seemingly clear-cut issues like police work in the Negev desert to national security. We're going to unpack his I told you so moments regarding history. And perhaps most explosively, we need to talk about his all-out verbal assault on the legal establishment regarding the investigations into October.
That last part is where things get incredibly heated. It frames the internal conflict in Israel in a way that is, well, it's quite startling. But before we get there, we really have to look at how he sets the stage. Because the atmosphere in that room is just chaotic. There are hecklers. There is shouting.
Standard Knesset behavior, right?
Standard, but amplified. But he starts with something incredibly somber. He effectively silences the room by opening with condolences regarding a tragedy in a Jerusalem kindergarten where toddlers...
Yeah, I noticed that. Such a sharp contrast to the shouting match that follows.
It's a moment of shared grief. He acknowledges the heavy shadow over the discussion. It's a rhetorical pivot point. He grounds the room in a shared human tragedy, something that transcends politics before launching into the political fray. It serves to remind everyone that despite the screaming, they are dealing with life and death. And then he takes that gravity and pivots immediately to policy.
And the first place he takes that volume is the issue of crime, specifically crime in the Arab sector and the Negev. Now, usually when politicians talk about crime, especially in a parliamentary setting, you expect to hear about budget. We need more police cars. We need more community centers. We need better education. Netanyahu does something very different here. He changes the dictionary.
He does, and this is critical to understanding his current strategy. He explicitly states that the criminal organizations operating in the South are not just criminals. He calls them terror organizations for all intents and purposes.
Terror organizations. That's a loaded phrase in Israel. I mean, that's usually reserved for Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad.
It's the most loaded phrase you can use. Words have legal and operational consequence. By labeling crime families as terror organizations, he isn't just using strong language for effect. He's justifying a complete change in the toolkit. Think about it. If it's just crime, who deals with it?
The police.
The police, detectives, the courts. You need evidence, you need warrants, you have due process.
Right, but if it's terror?
If it's terror, the rules change. You use the military, you use intelligence agencies, you use administrative detention.
And he lists that arsenal right there in the speech. He mentions deploying the Shin Bet, the ISA.
Which is the internal security agency usually reserved for counterterrorism. I mean, they are the ones who hunt down suicide bombers. Bringing the Shin Bet into the realm of domestic civilian policing is a massive shift. It's controversial because the Shin Bet has tools, surveillance tools, interrogation methods that the regular police do not have and arguably shouldn't have in a democracy dealing with civilians. But Netanyahu is arguing that the threat has mutated so much that the old distinction doesn't matter.
He also talks about aerial interdictions and using drones. He says, in war, as in...
Exactly.
Yeah.
He mentions that for the first time, drones are being used to stop weapons smug and even drug smugs area. He's signaling to the public that the old rules of engagement no longer apply. He's effectively militarizing the fight against organized crime. He's saying the police are overwhelmed. Fine, we'll send in the Air Force, figuratively and literally.
He also brings up the economic angle. He talks about protection racket law and let block these FAP10. But then he pivots to an enemy that I think resonates with anyone who has ever tried to get a permit for the bureaucratic. And he paints this really visual.
The abandoned army bases.
Yeah. This image really stuck with me. He talks about his tour of the Negev, the southern desert, and he describes seeing these old army bases covered in sand, just sitting there. They're empty. And he asks, why? Why aren't we building on them? Why aren't we developing?
It's a powerful image of stagnation. You have land. Israel is, 72% desert in the south, and you have the need for housing. So what's the blockade? His answer is Rami, the Israel Land Authority, and the legal advisor. He paints a picture of a country that is seemingly open for development, but is actually locked up by red tape and legal hurdles.
He's framing the rule of law, or at least the rule of lawyers, as the obstacle to prosperity. He promises to slash that regulation. He paints this vision of Dimona and Urim towns that were historically seen as, peripheral development towns, turning into modern cities, high-rises and cranes everywhere.
It's a very populist appeal, but it's a fact. He's saying, I want to build you skyscrapers. The lawyers want to keep the sand. It sets up a binary choice, progress with me or stagnation with the bureaucrat. He's positioning himself as the builder against the block.
But of course, in a 40 signatures debate, the opposition is sitting right there. And they have been accusing him of ignoring the Arab sector, of letting crime run rampant. They're saying, Mr. Prime Minister, this crime wave happened on your watch. You've been in power for most of the last year. So section 2 of our deep dive counter it. How does he handle that direct act?
He uses what I like to call the boomerang tactic. He takes the accusation that there's no funding or care for the Arab sector, and he throws it right back, but harder. He starts by claiming credit. He says, I was the one who passed the 15 billion shekel 5-year plan.
Which, to be fair, is a massive amount of money.
It is. It was a historic investment plan. But here's the nuance he introduced. He argues that when he allocated the money, it came with breaks. It came with strict oversight, police stations, and control mechanisms.
He says, I gave the money, but I made sure we knew where it was going.
Right. And then he turns to the previous government, the Bennett-Lapid government, which was in power for about a year and a half, and accuses them of removing the brake.
And this gets into the specific coalition politics of that time. He brings up RAM, the Arab party that sat in the previous coalition, and its leader, Mansour Abbas.
He doesn't just call them a political party. Listen to the language. He refers to the Muslim Brotherhood. He frames RAM as a proxy for the Muslim Brotherhood and claims that the Bennett-Lapid government surrendered to them to survive politically.
That is a heavy charge. I mean, he's not saying they formed a coalition. He's saying they surrendered to an extremist ideology.
Exactly. He accuses the previous government of dismantling the oversight mechanisms on that funding specifically to please Abbas. And the kicker, the punchline of this argument, he says that because they removed the oversight, the money didn't go to schools or roads or community centers. It was seized by the crime family.
So he's effectively blaming the opposition for the current crime. He's saying, you guys wanted to stay in power, so you gave unchecked cash to Ram, and that cash ended up buying the rifles that are terrorizing the South.
It's a brutal political narrative. I gave money with supervision. You gave money with surrender. It completely flips the script. Instead of the crime wave being a result of his neglect, it becomes the result of their weakness.
He even quotes a headline from Globes, a financial newspaper, to back this up. He loves bringing receipts, doesn't he?
He does. It adds a layer of don't take my word for it to his argument. Even though he is interpreting the events through a very specific, very political lens, he wants the listener to feel that the chaos in the streets is a direct result of the weakness of his political rival.
This theme of weakness versus strength, or blindness versus foresight, brings us to the next major section. Netanyahu loves to play the role of the prophet, the man who saw what no one else saw.
The prophet of security. It's a mantle he wears off, and frankly, it's one of his most effective rhetorical strategies. In this speech, he goes back 13 years to the construction of the border fence with Egypt.
I remember this debate vividly. It was a huge controversy at the time.
He reminds everyone of that. He says, I decided to build a fence. And what was the reaction? According to him, mockery. He claims the generals, the experts, the bureaucrats, the economists, they all said, it won't happen. It's too expensive. It's unnecessary. Who is going to walk across the Sinai?
And his vindication is demographic. He argues that without that fence, Israel would have been flooded by, and this is his number, 1 million infiltrators from Africa.
He ties this directly to the identity of the state. He says if that fence wasn't there, the Jewish and democratic character of Israel would have been washed away by this wave of migration. He is telling the Knesset, I saved the country's identity. I saved the state itself well, you were too short-sighted to see the threat.
And he doesn't stop with defense. He starts listing everything. It's like a greatest hits album of I was right, the gas extraction from the Mediterranean. He says they opposed it, and now it powers the economy. Cyber power, he says they laughed, and now Ingriel is a superpower. The Abraham Accords, he says they claimed peace with the Arab world was impossible without solving the Palestinian issue first, and he proved them wrong.
He's building a pattern of credibility. He's saying, I was right about the fence. I was right about the economy. I was right about the vaccine. So when I tell you about the threat today, you need to trust that I'm right. It's a way of dismissing his critics not just as wrong on a specific issue, but as historically consistently incompetent.
And the biggest threat, the one where he claims to be the ultimate realist, is of course Iran.
Exactly. He pivots from the fence to the existential threat. He mentions the heroic struggle of the Iranian people against their regime, which is a careful and important distinction. He doesn't demonize the Iranian populace, he praises them, but for the regime.
He warns that if Iran attacks, Israel will respond with force that Iran has never known.
It's a classic deterrent. But in the context of the speech, it serves another purpose. It reminds the listener of the scale of responsibility he carries. He's saying, you are arguing about petty politics. I am dealing with nuclear-level threats. It elevates his stature above the hecklers in the room. It's a reminder of the weight on his shoulders.
Speaking of stature, let's talk about the international stage. Because this speech isn't just about domestic enemies or Iranian threat, it's about how Israel fits into the world, specifically regarding Gaza and the U.S. And he talks about the day after in Gaza, or at least the next phase. He calls it Stage B.
Right. Stage A is the war itself. Stage B is disarmament and demilitarization. But what's fascinating here is not just what he proposes, but what he explicitly rules out. There have been rumors and proposals floating around for months about international forces, maybe Arab states like Egypt or Jordan or even further afield, keeping the peace in Gaza. Netanyahu is explicit. No Turkish soldiers, no Qataris.
That's a hard line. He's rejecting the idea of outsourcing security to regional players that might be hostile or, unreliable.
He is insisting on Israeli security control. He's saying we can't trust anyone else with our lives. And this leads him directly to his relationship with the United States. He admits openly that there are disagreements. He mentions a dispute over a Council of Advisors for Gaza that the U.S. supposedly wanted.
This is where he differentiates himself from the opposition again. He mocks them. He says that when the U.S. administration speak, the opposition trembles or jumps to attention.
He portrays them as yes men. He says, I know how to say no. He cites Rafah and the Philadelphia corridor strategic areas in Gaza as proof. He claims the U.S. didn't want Israel to go in, that the world warned against it, but he went in anyway because it was vital for victory.
He's framing himself as the only one capable of withstanding American pressure. And then in a moment that I think surprised everyone, he drops the trump card. Literally.
A tough cookie story, yeah.
It's such a weirdly specific anecdote. He tells the Knesset that Donald Trump called him a tough cookie or a tough nut.
And notice how he delivers it. He doesn't say it defensively. He doesn't say, oh, he called me names. He says, I take that as a compliment.
He really does. He wears it as a badge of honor.
It's a brilliant piece of branding for his base. Think about it. He's saying, look, even the most powerful man in the world thinks I'm tough. I'm difficult, and that's exactly what you need in a prime minister. He's turning the criticism that he is abrasive, stubborn, or hard to work with into his greatest asset. He's saying you want someone who is a tough cookie when the survival of the state is on the line. You don't want a nice cook, you want a tough cook.
It effectively frames the opposition as being too nice or too diplomatic to survive in the rough neighborhood of the Middle East.
Precisely. It turns his personality flaws, in the eyes of his critics, into necessary survival trait.
Okay, so we've covered the crime wave, the history lesson, the international stage, but now we arrive at the most explosive part. This is where he takes the gloves off. Section 5, the battle over.
This is the section regarding the investigations into October 7th. Now, everyone agrees there needs to be an investigation. The failure was too massive, the tragedy too deep. The question is how.
And the standard way in Israel, the gold standard, is a state commission of inquiry. It's usually appointed by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. That's what the families of the hostages want. That's what the opposition wants.
Historically, yes, that is considered the most independent, non-political mechanism. Netanyahu rejects.
Why?
He argues that the legal establishment is biased against him. Instead, he proposes a committee that is split 50-50, half appointed by the coalition, half by the opposition. He claims this is the only way to be balanced.
But his argument goes much deeper than just, procedural preferences. He tells a story about meeting with the state controller.
This is a conspiracy narrative, pure and simple. He claims he sat with the state controller, who is an oversight official, for hours. He says he gave him secret protocols, documents, facts that the public has never seen. He claims he showed evidence of what he knew and what he did.
He says, I showed up. I answered every question.
And then the twist. He says that just a few days after this testimony, the High Court and the Attorney General intervened to stop the controller's investigation.
He calls it a stay of proceedings or an interim order.
Right. And he asks the rhetorical question, why? What happened? His answer is that his testimony was so damaging to the narrative of his enemy, so revealing of the truth, that the gatekeepers had to shut it down to protect themselves.
He explicitly accuses the Attorney General, the highest legal official in the government, of trying to bury the truth. He quotes her response to the court where she says the government is harming the investigation, and he mocks it. He says, "I'm harming the truth. You are blocking the inquiry."
This is a total delegitimization of the legal system. He frames the Attorney General, the prosecutors, and the courts not as neutral arbiters of the law, but as active political players whose only goal is to topple his right-wing government.
He uses the phrase gatekeepers with such sarcasm. He says they are gatekeepers of the threshold, meaning they stop the truth from crossing the threshold.
It's an incredibly aggressive stand. He's telling his voters, the reason you don't know the truth about October 7th isn't because I'm hiding it. It's because the legal system is hiding it, because the truth exonerates me and indicts.
That is, wow, it flips the entire script.
Yeah.
Usually the leader is the one suspected of covering up. He's saying the cover-up is happening against him.
And he connects this to other legal battles he's had. He mentions the submarines affair and other scandals, calling them hot air and flying camels. He dismisses all legal challenges as part of this same grand conspiracy to remove the right from power. It's a way of inoculating his base against any future finding. If a commission eventually blames him, he has already told his supporters that the commission is rigged.
So if we look at the structure of this speech, it's really a journey. He starts with empathy for a tragedy, moves to a war on crime, claims historical vindication, asserts dominance, and finally identifies the internal enemy, legal system, and the opposition as the only thing standing in the...
That's the arc. It's a narrative of me against the world, but also me for you against the world. And he wraps it up with a very specific cultural reference to ground it all back in tradition.
The tree of life.
Yes, it was Tu B'Shvat, the Jewish New Year for tree. He closes by talking about the deep roots of the people in the land. He quotes the prophet Amos, "I will plant them upon their land, and they shall no more be plucked."
It's a poetic ending. But after such a combative speech, it feels like he's saying, we are the tree, we are the root, and the storms, whether they are Iranian nukes or legal investigations, won't uproot us.
It's a message of resilience, but it's resilience defined by his leadership and his survival. He equates his political survival with the nation's survival. He's saying, I am the root that holds the tree in place.
So let's try to pull this all together for the listener. We've unpacked the details, the terror designation for crime, the fence, the tough cookie, the attack on the Attorney General. What is the big picture here? What are we really looking at?
The big picture is that Netanyahu is operating on a total war footing. And I don't just mean the war on Gaza or the North. He sees himself fighting a war on 3 fronts simultaneously.
Okay, let's list them.
Front 1 is the actual physical security. Hamas, Iran, Hezbollah, and the newly defined terror of domestic crime families. That's the kinetic. Front 2, the diplomatic front, holding off international pressure, managing the U.S., refusing to compromise on security control, and asserting Israel's independence.
And front 3?
Front 3 is the internal political and legal front. He views the opposition, the protests, and especially the legal establishment as an active threat to his ability to govern and win the other 2 wars.
It's the siege mentality.
It is.
Yeah.
But he portrays himself not as the victim of the siege, but as the only one strong enough, the tough cookie to break it.
And that I told you so element is so strong, he's banking on the idea that people feel insecure and they look back and say, well, he was right about the fence. Maybe he's right about this too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's asking for a renewal of trust based on past foresight. He's saying, I saw the infiltrators coming when you did. I see the gatekeepers conspiring when you don't. Trust my vision.
It's compelling rhetoric. It explains why he remains such a formidable figure, even when his poll numbers. He knows how to tell a story where he is the indispensable hero.
And where his opponents are not just wrong, but dangerous. That's the key shift. They aren't just mistaken about tax policy. They are surrendering to the Muslim Brotherhood or burying the truth about October 7th. It raises the stakes of political disagreement to the level of national betrayal.
Which brings us to a provocative thought to leave you with today.
Right. We just heard the Prime Minister describe his political rivals and the country's legal institutions as obstacles to victory and truth. He described them as people who tremble before the U.S. and surrender to terror support.
If that's the diagnosis, if the Prime Minister views the legal system and half the parliament as saboteurs, what does that mean for the day after? Not the day after in Gaza, but the day after in Israel.
Exactly. We talk a lot about national unity during wartime. We see the slogans everywhere. Together, we will win. But if this speech is the roadmap, it suggests that the war over the internal identity of Israel, the war between the gatekeepers and the government, is only just beginning. If the gap is this wide during the fighting, what happens when the cannons stop firing?
A sobering question. We'll leave you to mull that over. As always, if you want to verify what we've discussed, the full transcript of the speech is available in the show notes. We always encourage you to read it for yourself, see what stands out to you.
Always go to the source. Don't just take our word for it.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.